Um, so last time I was talking about the tantric practice of visualizing oneself as a Buddha. And I said that, with tantric deities, you aren't supposed to do that if you haven't received an initiation into that particular deity. But um, in the tradition of FPMT, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, Lama Yeshe, they would have us visualize the Buddha and do a practice related to Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, and then imagine Buddha dissolving into us. Everything dissolves into emptiness, and then we arise as Buddha. And so I thought that since that's a practice that can be done without an initiation, that we could do that practice tonight at the beginning of our session, just so you get some taste of how powerful and beautiful this practice can be. Like getting a little taste of tantric practice. And so and so I thought to um, start with I'll describe the visualization of the Buddha, and then we'll do the prayers while visualizing the Buddha in front of us. And then we'll go back to the visualization and imagine Buddha dissolving into us and ourself arising as the Buddha. So we'll do the prayers in the context of the visualization of the Buddha. Okay, so make yourselves comfortable. It's good if you can sit with your back straight. Take a few minutes to bring your awareness into the present moment. Let go of thoughts of the past, like what you were doing earlier today or any other time in the past. So let go of all thoughts of the past. Just let your mind be in the present, present moment, present place, wherever you are. And likewise, don't let your mind wander to the future because we don't really know what lies in the future. So it's all speculation. And sometimes we need to think about the future to make plans, but not now. So right now, just let your mind be right here, right now, focused on what we are doing right here, not thinking about the past or the future. And bring into your mind, into your heart, as much love and compassion that you're able to feel. Feel how wonderful it would be if all living beings everywhere could be free of their suffering, their problems, and the causes of suffering. And how wonderful if they could all have genuine peace and happiness. And the causes of those, which are virtuous states of mind and virtuous activities of body, speech, and mind. And this isn't just like a fantasy, it is possible according to Buddhism because we all have the potential to transform ourselves and become free of all suffering and its causes and attain real peace and its causes, all the way up to the highest state of enlightenment. If we can aspire for that for ourselves and all other beings, that will motivate us to create the causes for it. And so think that that is your reason, your motivation for being here, participating in this session. Now imagine in the space in front of you at about the level of your forehead and a few feet away, the Buddha, made of light, so completely transparent, not solid like our bodies, but a body made of radiant, pure light. And he's sitting on a seat consisting of a lotus and then two discs representing the sun and the moon. His body's made of golden light, and he's wearing the saffron colored robes of a monk. His right hand is resting on his right knee with the palm against the knee and the fingers pointing down, touching the seat beneath him. His left hand is in his lap with the palm facing upwards, holding a bowl, a monk's alms bowl, and it's filled with medicinal healing nectar that is able to cure all of our delusions, all of our afflicted states of mind. And his face has an expression of infinite, unconditional love and compassion for every living being throughout the universe. So in the Buddhist mind, there isn't the slightest bit of aversion, irritation, criticalness, judgmentalness. None of those exist in the Buddha's mind. He sees every single sentient being with nothing but pure love and compassion, forgiveness, acceptance, and he's completely dedicated to helping each and every one of us, however long it takes, until we have all attained his state of enlightenment. So imagine that is what his expression shows, that immense love and compassion and dedication for all beings' welfare. So keep that visualization of the Buddha in front of you and think that this image of the Buddha represents all Buddhas, all enlightened beings, as well as all objects of refuge, the Dharma and the Sangha. All three jewels of refuge are represented by this one figure of the Buddha in front of you. And then we'll recite the prayers, starting with refuge and bodhicitta. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened. For the Buddha, the Dharma, Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. Reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time and rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until the end of cyclic existence and turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own merits and those of all others to the great enlightenment. This ground anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Niryatayame. Okay, so now we'll recite the mantra of the Buddha a few times. And first, visualize streams of radiant, pure white light flowing from the Buddha into you, coming into your body, and coming to every part of your body, from your head to your toes, your fingertips, filling all the tiny parts of your body like cells, molecules, atoms. So your whole body becomes suffused with this white light. And it purifies all negative energy, like all your bad karma created in the past, all your bad states of mind, like anger, greed, selfishness, ignorance, and so on. So all these negative things get purified. They just vanish. They completely disappear, become non-existent. Your body becomes clean and clear like a piece of crystal. So let's recite the mantra of the Buddha 3 times while doing that visualization. Hayata Om Mune Mune Maha Mune Soha Tayata Om Mune Mune Maha Mune Soha Tayata Om Mune Mune Mahamune Soha. And next, visualize yellow light and nectar flowing from the Buddha, like streams of yellow light, again, coming into your body and filling your body completely from the top of your head to your toes and fingertips, all the cells, molecules, atoms. Your whole body gets completely filled, suffused with this yellow light. And that represents all the Buddha's realizations and qualities, such as their wisdom, their love, compassion, and all of the realizations that enable them to be Buddha. And imagine that this light coming into you blesses your mind so that you can attain the same knowledge, qualities, and realizations, which we definitely can do. We have the potential to do that. So visualize that while we recite the mantra again 3 times. Taya ta om mune mune maha munaye soha. Taya ta om mune mune maha munaye soha. Taya ta om mune mune maha munaye soha. Now feel how wonderful it would be if you could reach the same state that the Buddha has attained, because then you would be free of all problems and full of all good qualities, and you would be able to dedicate yourself completely 100% of the time to helping all other living beings be free of their suffering and its causes and help them achieve this state of enlightenment as well. So just feel how wonderful that would be. Now imagine the Buddha coming to the space above your head, turning to face the same way that you're facing. And then the whole visualization melts into light, which flows down into you. And imagine your ordinary sense of self, I, me, which is very limited. Thinking of your faults, your mistakes, your shortcomings, a sense of unworthiness. Imagine all of that completely dissolving, disappearing, becoming non-existent. Whatever understanding you have of selflessness or emptiness, bring that to mind. Try to understand there is no permanent, fixed, real I or me anywhere. That kind of I just doesn't exist. It's a false notion, a false appearance. So let it go, dissolve it into emptiness. And imagine that your mind attains the same state as the Buddha's mind. You attain the same knowledge and qualities and realizations that the Buddha's mind has. And see if you can feel this is your real nature. This is how you really are, who you really are. And then imagine that wisdom, that mind that has all those excellent qualities and realizations, just like the Buddha, that now appears in the form of the Buddha, right where you are sitting. Just like you visualized before in front of you, imagine that happening right there where you are. So there's a lotus and sun and moon discs. And upon that, this body made of golden light with saffron colored robes, holding a bowl in your lap with your left hand and the right hand on your knee with the fingers touching the seat beneath you. Your face having an expression of infinite, unconditional love and compassion for all living beings throughout space. And now imagine that light rays go out from your heart, from your body, in all directions, just like rays of light going out from the sun. And there's no limit to this light. It goes to every corner of the universe, reaches every single sentient being, and goes into their bodies and minds and fills them completely, purifying all their suffering and causes of suffering, nourishing their positive potential so that they attain all the knowledge and qualities and realizations of the path, all the way up to enlightenment. So imagine all of them becoming Buddhas as well. They do have that potential. This is definitely possible. So normally when doing this kind of practice, you would dedicate the merit afterwards, but we'll dedicate the merit at the end of the session tonight. So like I say, that can give you some little taste of what you do in tantric practices. Um, Tantric practices are often quite complex. They involve lots of different prayers and visualizations and so on. But basically, it's like that. Um, you meditate on emptiness, selflessness, the lack of a permanent fixed I, and then motivated by bodhicitta, love and compassion for all living beings, you rise in the form of a deity, and then you do these actions like sending out light to all sentient beings, purifying them, and helping them gain all the realizations of the path as well. So it's really quite beautiful. It's a way of getting in touch with our Buddha nature and also nourishing our good qualities like our love and compassion and our wisdom and so on. And when doing practices like this, it's good if you kind of learn them by heart so that you don't have to open your eyes and read the text, like read the prayers and so on. But if you do it many, many times, eventually you know it by heart, and then you can just keep your eyes closed and do the practice on your own. And then it's really, really powerful, really effective. Okay, so last week there were a couple of questions that were asked, and I just wanted to go back to those, talk a bit more about those. So one question, I think it was from Faith, maybe, about non-duality, because I had been talking about how in Tantra, you develop the ability to have wisdom and compassion. Sorry, method and wisdom. Method and wisdom, those two main aspects of the path, you have them together in one mind simultaneously, as opposed to consecutively, as you do in the sutra practice. And that makes Tantra much more powerful. So then the question was, if this kind of mind was non-dualistic, and I said that I would check. So I did find some things. Um, so the term non-dual is used in Kriya Tantra. I'll talk more about Kriya Tantra later. That's the first of the four classes of Tantra. And within Kriya Tantra, there's a practice which is called yoga without signs. And this is described as a clear, profound, non-dual yoga. Yoga here doesn't mean like physical movements, but it's a mental practice, something you do with your mind. So it's clear, profound, and non-dual. And our teacher, Geshe Gelek, explained that profound in this expression, profound refers to emptiness, the mind that realizes emptiness, and clear refers to the appearance of the deity, the visualization of the deity. And then non-dual means that those two things, those two aspects are together in one single mind, one single awareness. So the realization of emptiness and the appearance of the deity, those two things are simultaneous in one single mind. So the term non-dual does refer to that fact that those two things, they're not separate minds, two separate minds that don't happen at the same time, but one single mind that happens at the same time. So the term non-duality is used there. However, I found something else where the Dalai Lama said that in reality, that only happens when you have attained enlightenment. It's only possible when you're enlightened to be able to have those two things simultaneously in one mind. But while you're practicing, while you're on the way to enlightenment and you're practicing, you imagine that happening. You imagine those two things happening simultaneously with one mind. But you can't actually do that in reality until you're enlightened. um, and then the term non-duality is also used in highest yoga tantra, but maybe I'll talk about that later when we get to that point of talking about highest yoga tantra, because if I start talking about it now, they'll may not make much sense. But anyway, to make it to summarize, the term non-duality is used in Tantra, but as I mentioned last time, that term non-dual or non-duality does have different meanings in different contexts. So you shouldn't think that it always means the same thing. Every time you encounter that word or you hear somebody talking about non-duality, you shouldn't think that, oh, they're all talking about the same thing. So you have to investigate, what do you mean by non-duality? What does that mean to you? Because it doesn't always have the same exact meaning. So just be careful about that. And then another question came up from Barbara, I think it was, who asked about how do you know when you're ready to start practicing Tantra? Was that your question? Yeah, yeah. And so I was thinking about that afterwards, and no, and I just wanted to say that what I'm doing in this course is trying to show that Tantra, the practice of Tantra, is actually quite profound and also kind of scientific. I think Lama Yeshe talked about that. He used that expression that it's scientific. And it isn't just about, visualizing deities and reciting mantras. There's much, much more than that. So that's what I'm trying to explain in this course. However, having said that, I think that for many Tibetan people, because in Tibet, I think Tantra was very widespread. Probably everybody was doing some kind of tantric practice. And I've spent time in India and also in Tibet and have seen how when there's a tantric initiation being given, everybody comes and they bring their kids, their babies, their grandmas, their grandpas. It's like they have to be there. This initiation is happening and they have to be there. And they have so much faith. They have just amazing faith, even if they haven't studied very much. I mean, many people in Tibet were even illiterate. They couldn't even read and write, but they had this amazing faith. So if there was a lama giving an initiation, they would go. And maybe afterwards, they weren't able to fully practice, that the Tantra, but, they would recite the mantra, they would think of that deity like Chenrezig Avalokiteshvara and pray and then recite the mantra. And so that was kind of the extent of their practice of Tantra. And that's probably still the case today. Like recently, the Dalai Lama was teaching in Ladakh and it was televised. I mean, it was on Zoom. Um, so, yeah, so people all over the world could watch it, but you could see there were tens of thousands of people attending. And he gave this initiation, Avalokiteshvara initiation, Thousand Armed Chenrezig. And there was, tens of thousands of people were there, including little kids and elderly people and teenagers and, all kinds of people. And yeah, you can see on their face. Sometimes they're sitting there the whole time with their hands together like this, just focusing on the Dalai Lama and what he's saying. And afterwards, the Dalai Lama advised them to recite Om Mani Padme Hum as much as they could. And so they're probably, my guess, I don't know for sure, but I guess many of the Tibetan people aren't able to fully practice all the different practices of Tantra. They may only, like I say, think of Chenrezig, do some prayers, recite the mantras, and that's fantastic. I mean, just doing that much is fantastic because it's virtuous. What they're doing is something virtuous, and it's helping them develop more compassion because Chenrezig is the Buddha of compassion. So thinking of Chenrezig, praying to Chenrezig helps you to have more of his kind of compassion. And also that connection, it's a way of staying connected with the Dalai Lama and staying connected with Chenrezig. So that will help them during their life, sustain them as they go through life and face different problems and difficulties and so on. And then after this life ends, having that connection with His Holiness, with Chenrezig and so on, will enable them to meet those teachings again in the future, continue to practice them, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of a very basic way of practicing Tantra that just about anybody could do. You don't have to be a highly advanced, yogi or yogini. Um, and it's still good. It's still valid. And so, yeah, so I don't want you to think that all the things I'm talking about in this class or all the things you read about in the books on Tantra, that if you can't practice all of those, then you can't practice at all. You have to just forget about Tantra. So I don't want you to feel that way. Um, it is important to have the right understanding of why we practice Tantra, what it's for, have the right motivation, and just do the best we can to develop those correct states of mind and and like that. Yeah. So don't worry if the explanation that I'm giving sounds like, oh, this is way over my head. I can't do this. Like I say, I'm trying to explain, you know, because for me, it's wonderful to learn about these deeper and more expansive, more extensive aspects of Tantra that you don't always hear about. I mean, yeah. But if you can practice all of them and you can just do a very simple practice, that's okay too. That's good enough. Does that help? Yeah.
That is very helpful. Very, very helpful. That way of practicing Tantra seems very doable to me. And the practice that we just did, um, I was very comfortable with. I really enjoyed that.
Mm.
And it was all of the other things that, again, I just don't have an understanding of that did kind of lead me to feel that, no, I am not ready. But by your explaining that, it really has helped. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, it is best to start with something relatively simple and, not jump in the deep end. Just like, yeah, when you're learning to swim, you start in the baby pool, ideally. Some aspects of Tantra are incredibly deep and complex and baffling, bewildering, and possibly off-putting for some people. Yeah. But yeah, looking at these more basic practices, initial practices that you're comfortable with, then start with those and practice those. Maybe later you might feel more interested and ready to do some of the other practices, but that's not necessary. That's completely up to you. Okay, so let's look at the new material for today. There's some slides. There'll be time at the end for questions. Okay, so the first slide just gives some different names for Tantra. This isn't particularly profound, but it's just useful to know because, there are these different terms that you can encounter. When you listen to teachings or you read books, you do encounter these different terms. And it's good to know that they're all kind of just different names for the same thing, but they do have meaning as well. There's reasons why these terms are used. Um, so first is Tantrayana, meaning the Tantra vehicle. Yana means vehicle. That's one term, Tantrayana, or just Tantra. That's the term we have been using. And the word Tantra, that's a Sanskrit term. It has the meaning of continuum, continuum. And one explanation of that is that our mind is a continuum. It's like a stream that's continuously flowing, changing, and eventually it will be enlightened. Our mind will be enlightened mind. Um, so that's one explanation of that term, Tantra. It's this mind that if we practice properly, we deal with it properly, that mind will eventually become Buddha's mind, enlightened mind. And then Vajrayana is another term, Vajrayana. And Vajra, the term Vajra, sometimes people translate it as a diamond, but that's not really accurate. A Vajra is it's an implement that is used in tantric practice. I don't have one right here in front of me, but I do have a bell, and the top of the bell is similar to the Vajra. You have these different spokes. So you have one set of spokes on the top and another set of spokes on the bottom. So it's like double of these. You've probably seen a Vajra or pictures of a Vajra. And it's said that the origin of the Vajra is one of the Hindu gods named Indra, who is regarded as the king of the gods or the leader of the gods, the ruler of the gods. And the Vajra was his kind of like scepter, the thing he would hold in his hand as a symbol of his power. And it was made of some material that was completely indestructible. Nothing could destroy it, but it could destroy other things. I think that's why sometimes people use the word diamond, because a diamond is similar. It's a very hard material that can't be, it's very hard to break diamonds, but a diamond itself is able to cut other things. But anyway, a Vajra isn't the same as a diamond. So that's why it's better to just keep it as Vajra because we don't really have an equivalent in English. And so this term, so the Vajra, this indestructible kind of implement, has that sense of being indestructible, and it's used as a symbol for this union of method and wisdom in one single mind, which I talked about last time. That's the one of the hallmarks of tantric practice is developing the ability to have method, uh, compassion, love, bodhicitta, and wisdom, the understanding of emptiness, to have those two things simultaneously in one mind, inseparably and indestructibly. So the Vajra is a symbol of that type of mind. And the third is mantrayana. So you're probably familiar with the term mantra. That's the word, we use to refer to these series of syllables, usually Sanskrit, like Om Mani Padme Hum. There's many, many different mantras. And the real meaning of mantra, man refers to mind, and tra means protect. So mantra means protection for the mind. And what we need to protect our mind from are ordinary appearances, ordinary concepts, ordinary attachments and graspings. It's the ordinary way that our mind operates, which is opposite to what we're trying to develop in the practice of the path, in particular the tantric path here. And so mantra means we're trying to protect our mind from those usual unhelpful ways of thinking and ways of seeing things. And the way, according to Tantra, the way that you do protect your mind from, these unhelpful states is through the practice of the four purities, which I explained last time. Seeing yourself in the form of the deity, and then your environment as being a pure land, and the resources, the things that you use as being pure, giving rise to, a pure state of mind rather than attachment. And then pure activities, the things that you do are to benefit sentient beings. So those four complete purities are practiced in order to stop our mind from getting caught up in our ordinary deluded, afflicted mental states and activities, which just keep us in samsara, prevent us from attaining enlightenment. And then the fourth term is resultant vehicle. And Tantra is called that because Tantra involves taking the result into the path. The result refers to the enlightened state that we aspire to attain, and we will attain one day. So imagining that resultant state of being a Buddha, being enlightened, imagining that it's happening right here in the present as part of our path, part of our practice. So that's the meaning of resultant vehicle. And Sutrayana, the other branch of Mahayana, um, doesn't have that kind of practice. When you're practicing Sutrayana, you don't do that. You don't imagine yourself as a Buddha right now. And so it's actually called a causal vehicle. Sutrayana is called a causal vehicle because what you're doing is creating the causes for the result that you want to attain, the state of a Buddha. So Sutrayana is the causal vehicle, and Tantrayana is the resultant vehicle. And then the fifth is a secret mantra or secret vehicle. So those are other terms used for Tantra. And the reason the word secret is used is because it's said that if you are doing tantric practice, it's best not to publicize it, to advertise it, but to keep, to do it privately, keep it to yourself. You can talk with other practitioners, other people you know who are also doing tantric practice. So you could talk with them, you can talk with your teacher, but not, be outside of that circle. It's better not to, because otherwise your whatever qualities, whatever realizations, whatever good results you have could degenerate, could be lost. Um, so it's similar to, if you have some valuable things in your house, like you have some jewelry or money in your house, you're not going to want to go to the supermarket and tell everybody about it. Right? So you keep quiet about those things. Otherwise, somebody might get the idea of breaking into your house and stealing. Well, that can't happen, in fact, with our, you know, qualities. Nobody can steal them from us. But it said that they could degenerate. It's possible that, good qualities and realizations could degenerate if we um, talk about our practice too widely. But another reason for this, the idea of secrecy is because some aspects of Tantra could be upsetting to other people, or they could develop misconceptions, wrong conceptions about Tantra. And so it's better to not talk about it too much. Well, it's not really secret anymore. Yeah, it's lots. Yeah, but then, as I mentioned before, because so many people have learned about Tantra and have written books about it and put things up on the internet. And a lot of that information is actually wrong. It's mistaken, it's distorted. And so that's why it's better now to talk about, what Tantra really is all about, to, yeah, disseminate the correct information and try to dispel the incorrect information. Okay, so then next is looking at, you don't need to learn all those names. It's just helpful because, like I say, when you read different books or you listen to teachings, you will hear those terms used. And yeah, can be helpful to know what they mean, and also just the fact that they are all interchangeable, just different names for the same thing. Okay, so then let's look at the four classes of Tantra. So within Tantra, there are these four divisions. They're usually called four classes. And each of these four classes contains different kinds of practices, different deities, and so on. And so they're usually explained in this order that's kind of from easier to more difficult. So the first class is called Action Tantra. The Sanskrit term is Kriya, which means action Tantra. And one way that these four classes of Tantra are differentiated, distinguished, is in terms of what is being emphasized, what kind of action or activity is emphasized. And so for action Tantra, Kriya Tantra, the emphasis is mainly on external actions. So some of you may have participated in Nyungne retreats. I don't know if that is that ever done at your center, Tupta Normal Ling? Do you ever have Nyungne retreats? It's a 2-day practice. No?
I don't know.
Okay.
I've only been here a year, so
Yeah. Well, within the FPMT, many centers do have a Nyungne, and it's a retreat that takes 2 days, and it's focused on Avalokiteshvara, thousand-armed Avalokiteshvara or Chenrezig, and it involves some fasting. Like on the first day, you take the 8 Mahayana precepts and you eat just one meal, lunch, before noon. Then you don't eat again, but you can drink. You can drink all you want. And then the second day of the retreat, um, you also take the 8 Mahayana precepts in the morning, but on that day you don't eat at all, and you also don't drink, and you keep silence. So you make those vows: I will not eat, I will not drink, and I will not speak, except, of course, doing the practice. Then you do this practice. It's a bit lengthy, involves visualizing Avalokiteshvara, reciting various prayers, mantras, also doing prostrations. It can take between 2 and 3 hours each session, and you do that session 3 times throughout the day on both days. And then on the third day in the morning, you do one more session and break the fast. So you start drinking again. And yeah, it's a very powerful practice. It's for purification. And yeah, in Tibet and well, nowadays also in India, Nepal, and so on, and in some FPMT centers, they will do this. They will have these retreats, and there's also the custom of at Sakadawa. Sakadawa is usually in May or June. That's the day that the Buddha um, was born, attained enlightenment, and passed away. And so there's one day when those three important activities are commemorated. So there's this custom of doing a number of nyungnes, sometimes even eight nyungnes, one after another, which takes like 2 weeks around that time. Anyway, I just thought some of you may have participated in a Nyungne. So a Nyungne is part of Kriya Tantra. It's according to that class of Tantra. So in this class of Tantra, as it says here, the emphasis is on external actions, which means cleanliness is very important. So when you're doing Kriya Tantra practice, you need to keep yourself very clean, your clothes, your hands, your mouth, brushing your teeth. And also there's a lot of rituals you do. So the emphasis is more on, yeah, rituals and cleanliness, external actions. Um, and then the second class of Tantra, the Sanskrit term is Charya, and that's usually translated as performance Tantra. And in this class of Tantra, it said that there's equal emphasis on external actions as well as internal actions. Internal actions means what's going on in your mind. Okay. So there's equal emphasis. I mean, of course, action tantra also it's also important to take care of your mind and make sure your mind is in a good state, you have the right motivation, you're not letting your mind follow afflictions and so on. So it's not that there's no importance given to the internal activity of your mind, but there's just a lot of emphasis on doing things externally, with your body and so on. And then Yoga Tantra, the third class. There's also, some external activities to do, but the emphasis is getting more on internal actions. What's going on in your mind, your meditative state. The emphasis is on that. And then the fourth class of Tantra is highest Yoga Tantra. In Sanskrit, it's Mahayana Yoga Tantra. There, the emphasis is mainly on internal actions. So your mental state, not so much what you do physically. Yeah. Also, another thing I forgot to mention with Kriya Tantra, diet is very important. So when you're doing Kriya Tantra practice, you need to refrain from certain types of food, like meat and eggs, fish, and onions and garlics. So you, you need to eat a very kind of clean and pure diet. Whereas that isn't so important, especially with highest yoga tantra. So that it's not emphasized that you need to be very careful about your diet. Excuse me. So in my experience with, Tibetan lamas and the kind of practices they do, the initiations they give, mostly they are in the first and the fourth of these classes of Tantra. Yeah. I don't think I have ever received an initiation into the second or the third. They don't seem to be given very much. They maybe occasionally, but not very common. So most of the time when lamas give initiations, they are either Kriya Tantra, Action Tantra, the first class, or the fourth, highest Yoga Tantra. I don't know why. I don't know the reason for that, but maybe it's just the way things developed in Tibet. Because Tantra also exists in Japan. There's one tradition in Japan. I think it's called Shingon. It's probably not so well known, but it's definitely there, still practiced today. And my understanding, if I remember correctly, the main practice that they do there belongs to the second of these four classes, Charya Tantra. We'll talk a little bit about that more later. Okay, so, and there's also another way of distinguishing these four classes of Tantra, and that is in terms of the degree of desire that a practitioner is able to work with and utilize in their practice without succumbing to desire, to attachment. I did talk about that last week or the week before. This is one of the features of Tantra in general, as opposed to Sutra. So within Tantra, instead of seeing a delusion like desire, like attachment, as something that has to be overcome, it has to be eliminated completely, but there are practices for utilizing desire. And it's mainly talking about sexual desire, desire of feeling of lust, that energy of lust. And so ordinary people, ordinary beings, when that kind of desire comes up, they usually get totally caught up in it, follow it, act it out, and sometimes create negativity. And that's one of the main things that keeps us stuck in samsara, taking rebirth again and again. So it's like energy that can be very harmful in a sense of keeping us in samsara. But a tantric practitioner develops the ability to work with that desire, and so that instead of getting caught up in it and acting it out in unhelpful ways, they can actually use it in their practice to enhance their practice, to enhance their realization of emptiness. It's not easy to do. You have to be quite an advanced practitioner to be able to do this. You also have to have an understanding of emptiness. But, it's basically, when desire arises, switching the mind to emptiness, meditation on emptiness, and the desire produces a kind of blissful feeling that enables the mind to remain more focused on the experience of emptiness, and in that way, increasing your wisdom of emptiness. So they know how to tap into that energy of desire and use it to enhance the realization of emptiness. So that kind of practice is found in all these classes of Tantra, but there's different levels of desire that a practitioner is able to work with. So with regard to action Tantra, the practitioners of action Tantra, Kriya Tantra, are able to use the amount of desire energy that comes up just from looking at an attractive object, like, a person who's very attractive. Okay, so when you see an attractive person, then desire can come up in the mind. And it's kind of a lower level of desire. It's an initial level of desire. It's not super, super strong. And so a Kriya Tantric practitioner is able to use that kind of desire in their practice and transform it into the path to enhance their realization of emptiness. And then for the second class of Tantra, performance Tantra, practitioners of this type of Tantra are able to use a slightly more strong level of desire, the kind of desire that arises if you were to actually exchange glances with the other person, the person you find attractive. And if they were looking at you and, exchanging glances, smiling, laughing, not yet touching, but just kind of having this, visual contact with the other person. So that produces a stronger kind of desire, stronger level of desire than the first one, where you're just looking. And so a Charya tantric practitioner is able to utilize that level of desire in the path without being overwhelmed by it. Then for Yoga Tantra practitioner is able to use a yet stronger level of desire, the desire of touching and holding hands. Okay, so if you were to actually start touching the other person, then the desire that comes up would be even stronger, more powerful. But, a person who's at that level of practice can still use that level of desire. Now, this doesn't mean that a practitioner of Yoga Tantra is going around and touching people and, letting that kind of desire arise. More, it's in meditation. Okay, so you would imagine, visualize the situations that would arouse that kind of desire, and then you work with that desire, that level of desire, bring it into the path and enhance your understanding of emptiness. And then highest Yoga Tantra, this is the most difficult level of practice. Highest Yoga Tantric practitioner is able to use the desire that comes from actual sexual union. Okay, so that's a much more powerful degree of desire that, ordinary people wouldn't be able to manage. They just go completely berserk. But a highest yoga tantra practitioner can use that kind of powerful, strong desire and work with it in their meditation to enhance their realization of emptiness. So this is another way that they explain the difference between these different classes of tantra, depending on different practitioners, different meditators have different capabilities with regard to handling desire, and such that they don't get carried away by it, hijacked by it, but can actually use it in their practice. And like I said before, it doesn't mean that the practitioner is actually going out and, looking at attractive people and touching them and so on, or having sex with them, but it's part of the visualization. So within tantric practices, for example, you may visualize beings who are very beautiful, very attractive, and visualizing them could arouse this feeling of desire. Okay, so that's just an introduction to the 4 classes of Tantra. So now let's start looking at some of the features of each class of Tantra, starting with Kriya Tantra, Action Tantra. Okay, so in order to practice Kriya Tantra, you need to first train well in the 3 principal aspects of the path, which I talked about the first session. Renunciation. So you need to have a good understanding of the suffering nature of samsara, and overcome attachment to samsara, thinking it's a great place to be and you want to stay here. So we need to see very clearly that samsara is like a prison, like a horrible situation, and we want to be free of it. And the way to do that is overcoming the afflictions, the delusions that keep us in samsara, and also karma. So we need to train our mind in that, renunciation. Then secondly, bodhicitta, where you see that all other sentient beings who are stuck in samsara are also in this terrible situation and want to be free. They want to be free of suffering. They want to be happy. And they're just like you, just like me. And so you extend your wish for freedom from samsara to all sentient beings and take on the responsibility. I myself will do what it takes to help all sentient beings be free of samsara and all its suffering, help them all have happiness. And the way to do that is to become a Buddha, become fully enlightened. So you work on that state of mind until it's quite strong, and that's your motivation for practicing Tantra. Then the third principal aspect is understanding of emptiness. So one needs to develop as much as possible a good understanding of emptiness, meditate on it to get a taste of it and experience of it. So you need to spend some time studying, thinking about meditating on those aspects of the path. Best if you do it with like the entire Lam Rim, really make yourself familiar with the whole Lam Rim so you know what you're doing, why you're doing it. Then on the basis of that, you need to take an initiation. I'll talk later in another session about initiations, but that's like the entrance to tantric practice, receiving an initiation. And there are 3 lineages in Kriya Tantra. And these are called the Tathagata lineage, the Lotus lineage, and the Vajra lineage. So when you take an initiation, it would be into one of these 3. And I mentioned already Avalokiteshvara, thousand-armed Avalokiteshvara. This is one example of a Kriya Tantra deity, and that deity belongs to the lotus lineage. And for the Tathagata lineage, it's said that the lord of that lineage is Manjushri. So I'm not sure if that means that when you receive an initiation of Manjushri, it belongs to that lineage. I'm not completely sure. And then for the Vajra lineage, the last one, the lord of that is said to be Vajrapani. So those three deities are actually often on tankas. Manjushri, Avalokiteshvara, and Vajrapani. They're often like a threesome, trio shown in tankas, and so they are representing these three lineages of Kriya Tantra. And then the second point is you should keep well the bodhisattva vows and commitments taken at that time. So anytime you receive an initiation, you take an initiation, you always take bodhisattva vows. And if you've taken them before, then you're renewing them. You're renewing your bodhisattva vows. But if you never took bodhisattva vows before, then you do have to take them at the time of an initiation. So that's something to be aware of. You're taking on those vows. And then commitments. So that depends on the teacher, the master who's giving the initiation. They decide, I guess it's up to them to decide what commitment they want you to follow. I mean, people sometimes aren't happy about the idea of a commitment. A commitment would be, for example, you need to recite a certain number of mantras every day, or it could be more. They might ask you to do a whole practice every day, or they might ask you to do a retreat on that deity. And some people, aren't happy about the idea of commitments, like, oh, why do I have to do this? But then you have to ask yourself, well, why am I taking the initiation to begin with? The whole purpose of taking an initiation should be to become enlightened, to help all sentient beings. And in order to become enlightened, you have to create some causes. It's not going to just happen because you want it to happen. You're not going to just wake up one morning and suddenly you're a Buddha. You have to practice. You have to create causes to reach enlightenment. And tantric practice includes some of the causes for attaining enlightenment. So it's like contradictory to say, I want to take an initiation, but I don't want to do any practice. But I think lamas, are often very lenient. I don't know what the word is. They don't give really big, heavy commitments because they know sometimes people don't keep them. But it is important to take commitments seriously. That's something that was drummed into me, and I do, take my commitments seriously. I really do try to keep them. Yeah, it's also negative if you don't commit them, if you don't keep them. And so you have to be prepared for that. And it's good to try to find out ahead of time what the commitments will be and then check. Is it, am I willing to do that? Is that something I'm willing to do, able to do? And then the actual practice of Kriya Tantra, it basically involves these two types of yoga with signs and yoga without signs. So I'll explain those a little bit on the next couple of slides. So when we encounter this word yoga, probably what comes to our mind is, putting on, a certain outfit and then, getting your yoga mat out and doing some physical movements, some physical postures, stretches, and so on. So we tend to think of yoga as something physical, but here This is talking about a mental practice. So yoga with signs, the word sign in the first bullet point, it refers to conventional truth. And conventional truths, according to Madhyamaka, includes everything other than emptiness. Yeah, whatever exists that isn't emptiness is a conventional truth. And but here in the in the context of Tantra, we're talking about practices where you visualize a deity and you recite mantras. So those are conventional truths. Yeah. A deity like Avalokiteshvara and the mantra Om Mani Padme Hum, those are examples of conventional truths. So when you're doing yoga with signs, you're working with conventional truths. So it says yoga with signs involves practices that engage in focus on conventional truths, such as deities, mantras, and also thinking about sentient beings and sending out light rays to benefit them. Those are conventional truths. And then for the term yoga, the Dalai Lama explains yoga literally means joining the mind to an actual fact, to something true, something genuine. And here in this context, the meaning is joining, or we could say non-duality, that term non-duality that was asked about. The profound, so there's two things that are being joined. One is the profound, and the profound refers to the realization of emptiness, the wisdom mind that understands emptiness. And then the manifest, I think that's another way of, another term for that is clear. And that refers to appearing as a deity. So I explained that last time that this is how method and wisdom are joined or practiced in Tantra. You meditate on emptiness, and ideally you have an understanding of emptiness, so you are actually able to meditate on it and get an experience of it. Then you imagine that mind understanding emptiness, that very mind, that wisdom mind, appearing in the form of a deity like Avalokiteshvara. So Avalokiteshvara is made of the wisdom understanding emptiness, not made of flesh, blood, bones, cells, atoms like our bodies. But what makes the body of Avalokiteshvara is the wisdom of emptiness. And so that's the two things there are the mind understanding emptiness and the form it takes, the deity. Okay, so there's two things there that are being joined, and we're trying to cultivate the non-duality of those two things together in one single mind. So that's what the term yoga refers to here. So just to give an example of this type of practice, yoga with signs, like if you're doing the practice of Avalokiteshvara, so within this, there's a sadhana kind of practice that you go through. And within that, there's a part where you meditate on emptiness. You have to, spend some time meditating on emptiness and then arising out of emptiness in the form of the deity, Avalokiteshvara. Just similar to what we did at the beginning of the class today, getting a sense of non-existence of our ordinary sense of I, me, self, letting that dissolve in emptiness, and then that mind understanding emptiness arising in the form of a Buddha. Okay, so whatever the deity it would be, like Avalokiteshvara. So you rise in the form of the deity and recite the mantra. So that's just one type of practice of yoga with signs, but there's others as well that might involve other kinds of visualizations, other ways of reciting mantra. Sometimes you can recite it out loud or silently. So it's kind of a series of different practices included in this type of practice, yoga with signs. And so when you receive, once you have received an initiation into a practice, into a deity like Avalokiteshvara, then you're qualified to receive teachings on how to do the practice, and so you can learn about these different levels of practice and engage in them. So I was thinking about, there's a couple of books. If you have received the initiation of Avalokiteshvara, thousand-armed Avalokiteshvara, if you've received that initiation and you want to know how to do these practices, you can find some there's a book from Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archives, which is called Abiding in the Retreat, and it's teachings that Lama Zopa Rinpoche gave on the Nyungne practice, how to do the Nyungne practice. And so within that book, you would find, some of the practices involved with yoga with signs. And there's also this book called Becoming the Compassion Buddha, published by Wisdom Publications. And this contains teachings from Lama Yeshe, also Chenrezig. It's on the practice of Chenrezig. And he explains some of the practices that are included in yoga with signs, different kinds of visualizations you can do, different ways of reciting the mantra, and so on. So just mentioning those if you're interested to learn more. So down at the bottom, yoga with signs is practiced to attain calm abiding. So when you're doing a practice like Avalokiteshvara, if that was the deity that you're focused on, then you would do the sadhana, which includes visualization, recitation, and so on. And at a certain point in the sadhana, once you have already generated the visualization of the deity, yourself as the deity, Avalokiteshvara, and also there's other surrounding things to visualize, then you stop and focus on that visualization. And that visualization is what you use to develop calm abiding. So that's how calm abiding is developed in tantric practice. You use, instead of visualizing a Buddha in front of you, or your breath as an object for developing calm abiding, you use the deity, yourself as the deity, plus whatever other aspects there are of the visualization. Sometimes they can be very complex. You can have a whole mandala around you with other deities and other details and so on. So it's on this level of practice that you cultivate calm abiding. And the last bullet point is, it's the cause of the Rupakaya, form bodies. So practicing yoga with signs is what creates the cause to attain the form bodies of a Buddha. And you can see that because when you're doing this kind of practice, you're visualizing yourself, as a deity, a Buddha image, and then sending light out to sentient beings, purifying them, helping them attain all the realizations of the path, and so on. And that's exactly what you do when you become a Buddha. When somebody becomes a Buddha, the whole purpose of becoming a Buddha is helping sentient beings. And the way they do that is by emanating different forms that are suitable to different types of beings, and they go out and help the sentient beings and guide them on the path. So here in this practice, it's kind of like dress rehearsing. You're doing a dress rehearsal for what you're going to do when you actually become a Buddha, become an enlightened being. And so in that way, you're creating the cause to eventually attain that. Okay, then next. So that's yoga with signs. And then there's yoga without signs. And again, signs refers to conventional truths, anything that isn't emptiness. So yoga without signs means you're mainly focusing on emptiness. This is mainly meditation on emptiness. And it's called ultimate yoga. This is ultimate yoga. Yoga with signs is called conventional yoga because you're dealing with conventional truths. Whereas yoga with signs, you're dealing with ultimate truth, which is emptiness, emptiness of inherent existence. So it's called ultimate yoga. And it's practiced to attain a union of calm abiding and special insight. So that's also explained in Sutrayana. This is something essential if we want to attain enlightenment. One of the things we have to do is attain calm abiding, single-pointed concentration, and we also have to develop an understanding of emptiness. And then we have to bring those two together and attain the union of calm abiding and special insight into emptiness. And so that is done at this level of the practice, yoga without signs. And this type of practice is the cause of the Dharmakaya, also, which sometimes translated as truth body. So that the Dharmakaya refers to the Buddha's mind, omniscient mind, that sees all phenomena, whatever exists, and also sees their emptiness of inherent existence. So sees all ultimate truths and all conventional truths simultaneously. So by practicing the yoga without signs, you are creating the cause for that result at the time of enlightenment. And last bullet point, it mainly relies on meditation on emptiness, but also involves meditating on the deity. So normally you practice yoga with signs first, where again, you go through visualization, dissolving into emptiness, arising as the deity, reciting the mantra. So there's kind of different types of practice that you do within yoga with signs. And then having gained familiarity, proficiency in that type of practice, you are ready to do this practice of yoga without signs. And so when you practice yoga without signs, you do continue to have this visualization of yourself as the deity, but you're not focused so much on that. Instead, you focus more on the emptiness of the deity's body, the emptiness of all phenomena, whatever exists in samsara and beyond. So you're focusing more on that, the emptiness factor. And it's also said that you alternate analytical meditation and stabilizing meditations. And eventually, you attain this union of calm abiding and special insight, observing emptiness. So this is a more difficult, more advanced level of practice. So generally one would start by getting familiar with yoga with signs and then move on to yoga without signs. but both do need to be practiced. So I'm just talking about this in a very general way because, yeah, to know the details and actually start doing the practices, one would need to receive an initiation. But just so you have some idea what's involved in Kriya Tantra. So I'll stop there for tonight, and if you have any questions, you can unmute yourself and ask. Yes. What's your name?
Josang.
Josang. Okay.
I don't have a tantric. Well, I have the four-arm Chenrezig initiation from His Holiness through YouTube, a direct, not a recorded, but a direct live YouTube. And then when I was in Nepal, I got initiated by the Sakya Tenchin, but I didn't understand anything, so I didn't really get initiated. I was one of those people who was there and just thousands and thousands of people coming and going, and I was just, I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
But I'm attracted to medicine Buddha, and without having a higher tantric initiation of any of those levels, can I just practice the meditating and just practicing receiving the nectar, whether it's from Shakyamuni Buddha, like we did today, or medicine Buddha?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I'm not completely sure about medicine Buddha. I mean, I know there are initiations of medicine Buddha. I have received initiations of medicine Buddha, but it seems like medicine Buddha is also in Sutrayana. In Chinese Buddhism, for example, which is mainly Sutrayana, they have medicine Buddha. In many Chinese temples, they have statues, images of medicine Buddha. So I think that, yeah, medicine Buddha seems to exist both in Sutrayana and also in Tantrayana. And most of the practices we do, at least the ones that I know, like in the FPMT, medicine Buddha practices we do, they involve visualizing the medicine Buddha outside. Sometimes, if it's a very kind of complex practice, you have 7 medicine Buddhas above your head, or maybe it's 8. It's 7 medicine Buddhas plus Shakyamuni Buddha, so it comes to 8. So sometimes they're in a stack above your head or they're in front of you, but mainly they're outside of you, and you do the various prayers and mantras and visual, and then you imagine the light coming into you, but they don't involve, yourself becoming medicine Buddha, but just getting the blessings of medicine Buddha. But I think there probably are practices that if you have received an initiation, then you would generate yourself in that form of medicine Buddha. So there's, different practices. So it's fine. Yeah, if you want to practice medicine Buddha in those ways, like visualizing outside and then the light coming in, you can do that without an initiation. Does the center, Tupten Norba Ling, do they have regular medicine Buddha practice?
Yes. With 7.
Okay, the 7 medicine Buddhas. Yeah, I love that practice. Faith, have your hand up.
You're using the term initiation. Is that synonymous with empowerment? Can you be Is there Tara, for example, or empowered by with Tara, empowerment? Same.
Yeah, yeah. The term in Tibetan is Wang, and Wang has that meaning of power. So it's often translated as empowerment. But
Okay.
I guess I just got used to using the term initiation. I don't know who decided to use that term, but yeah, it's the one that I've always.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, it's just two different ways of translating the same term. And at some point later, I will talk about initiations because there's also different kinds of initiations. So it's good to know a little bit about those. Anyone else?
I have a question. I've done different sadhana practices at the Abbey there, like Chinrezi, Tara, Medicine Buddha. I like different retreats and things like that. So just visualizing the deity in front of me, never as myself as the deity. And I did do some sort of empowerment with Manjushri. But more recently, I was introduced to Achichoki, which is like said to be the Dharma protector and the Drakung lineage, or just the Buddhist teachings in general, and or emanation of Tara, Vajrayana. So Achi, and I noticed as I was like just seeing the image and doing the mantra, it was a unique experience that I had an experience with other deities where I felt like a lot of warmth in my chest and like kind of emotional, just like heart opening. And so I feel really drawn to this deity. So what to do with that? I'm wondering, like, I don't know, what do you think? Just keep letting
That,
it open my heart?
yeah,
I don't know.
I agree with that name, but yeah, I think every tradition has their own different assortment of deities and protectors and so on and so forth. So, yeah, I mean, if you have that kind of experience, it could be because of having practiced it before, in previous lives. Maybe you had some connection with that deity before, and, meeting it again in this life is, bringing up those feelings, those experiences. Um, so yeah, if you feel like continuing to do that practice, then do that. Just see what happens. So there's like a sadhana or
Yeah, there's an actual um like an empowerment that's given, and then just I guess a daily practice that people do. Just
but it's just visualizing outside, not yourself.
yeah, that's all my experience has been. Yeah.
Yeah, I think with protectors, with Dharma protectors, usually my experience, you don't usually bring them into yourself and then transform yourself. They're more
Mm-hmm.
like you visualize them outside and you pray to them, you ask them to help, protect you, keep away obstacles and so on. That's their role, their job is to protect. Yeah. Yeah, there's so many. Tantra is just so complex. There's just like so many different deities and also these other figures like Dharma protectors and dakinis and so on. I always found it kind of overwhelming. Um, so yeah, there's some that I feel comfortable with. and continue practicing and praying to and reciting the mantra of and so on, and feel that's good enough for me. I don't need to know about all the others. Hi, Bob. Go ahead.
There are so many, practices in terms of different deities in Tantra. How do you know which one you have a particular affinity towards? You know, you end up taking so many initiations and so many commitments, and yet, I would think that it would be better served to be practicing one. But how do you know in advance of taking an initiation which deity or practice you might have the closest karmic connection to?
Yeah, I don't really know. I mean, sometimes if you have a teacher, a lama that you are close to and take advice from, sometimes you can ask that lama, which deity should I focus on? Otherwise, you can just follow your own intuition, and it's good to have some knowledge about that deity and their qualities, their particularities, and like if you feel I really want to develop compassion, that's something I need to work on and I want to work on. And so if you have that kind of feeling, then it would make sense to practice Chenrezig, Avalokiteshvara. That's what he embodies. So that might be one way of going about it. It seems that the lamas, I mean, in my experience, they take numerous initiations and do numerous practices every day. I don't know whether that's suitable for everybody or not. Sometimes you can end up, like you say, just spending so much time doing these different practices and maybe not doing them so well because you're just trying to finish them. That's not ideal. So it does make sense to focus. And I think that's what most people do. They'll focus mainly on one of the deities, one of the practices, and try to do that one well. And then with the others, just do their commitment, keep up their commitment. So I don't know. I mean, this is for me also sort of a question. And yeah. But I guess in my experience, I do sort of feel more connected with some of the deities rather than others. So I do try to have respect and appreciation for all the different deities and practices, but those that I feel more connected with, more like I feel benefit by doing those practices. So then I do focus more on those. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's helpful. Thank you.
And it seems like it's also okay to partway along. One of my teachers, who's a Rinpoche, um, told me that his previous incarnation, who lived in Tibet and was a meditator, spent most of his life in in a cave or in a hut meditating in retreat. And he had this previous incarnation had been practicing some highest yoga tantra deities. But then at a certain point decided to mainly focus on Avalokiteshvara. So he didn't stop doing those other practices. He continued doing them, but he mainly practiced Avalokiteshvara. I don't know why he didn't give a reason why, but I was quite surprised by that because our lamas often, you know, encourage us to do highest yoga tantra practices. Those are the most important ones. So it's interesting that this, highly accomplished meditator chose to focus on a Kriya Tantra deity. But it's just to show that, it's okay at a certain point in time if you feel like you want to switch and focus more on one deity rather than another, that is okay to do.
Thank you.
That's what I took from that conversation. Hey, if there are no more questions, we could do the dedication prayers. So recall that we started the session tonight with generating a really positive, altruistic intention to help all living beings and become a Buddha, to be able to help all living beings. And then we did that practice of Shakyamuni Buddha and visualizing ourselves transforming into Shakyamuni Buddha, and then sending out light to help sentient beings. So just that itself creates tremendous merit, positive energy. And then listening and discussing these teachings on Tantra, which is a very, very precious type of practice for the attainment of enlightenment. So even just learning more about it is very beneficial. So feel confident that we have spent our time well. We have created merit, positive energy during this time. So now we dedicate this merit to all sentient beings, to the attainment of enlightenment for all sentient beings, and also to the long life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. We can think of all other teachers as well. Pray for their long life. And then we'll also do the prayer for the swift return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. Incomparably kind and supreme Tenzin Gyatso, the wish-fulfilling, wish-granting jewel, source of every benefit and happiness in this world, may you have a long life and all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. Peerless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Shravakas, Parcheka Buddhas, victorious Losang, father and sons, together with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of the infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now. Holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make request. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and from other living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Lou, for hosting, and thanks all of you for joining.
Thank you, Venerable.